Welcome once again to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mail. We got Sports 25 to life. Talking about tonight's 7-game slate on DraftKings, of course. Cash games, GPPs, everything in between. And interesting night tonight. Like we were lamenting earlier, Clayton Kershaw, Felix Hernandez on the same night. Once again, seems like there's always those 2 nights a week where you're just awful pitching. You don't want to pick anybody. And then there's that one night a week where it's Kershaw and Felix Hernandez. And even Pineda now for a while, it seems. Yeah. All in the same night. So, certainly all these guys in play. We talked about it kind of in detail on the Pitcher Nail Down podcast earlier, but obviously Clayton Kershaw, you mentioned him as obviously a cash game option. He's always a cash game option, but a great GPP play because there is a high total in Chicago. The wind is blowing out, and that might keep some people off them, but really no one even close to the strikeout upside that he has tonight in Wrigley Field.
Yeah, I feel the same way. The big thing with him is his innings haven't been there all the time. It's been holding him back a little bit, but he should easily be able to get there today against a free-swinging Cubs team. You got to think he probably pitches 7-8 innings unless, of course, he ends up with a bunch of fly balls that just leave the yard.
Or Don Mattingly just ruins him.
Yeah, some of that's been pitch count, though, yeah. And, you got to think his pitch count's going to stay pretty low today against a Cubs team that swings at everything.
Yeah.
So, outside Chris Bryant, they just don't really take pitches. Rizzo's okay, but outside of that, you're talking about Starlin Castro, who sees 3 pitches in a bat, and Dexter Fowler, who doesn't see a ton of pitches for a leadoff guy, and some other guys like that. I think he's by far the best GPP play at the very least. I think he's probably, I want to say, the best cash game play also, but these other 2 guys at the top here, we both really like a lot. I like Felix Hernandez quite a bit. It's the lowest total of the day at 6.5. So he's going to be a guy I target quite a bit in cash games, especially on DraftKings, where he's almost $2,000 cheaper than Kershaw. I think it just gives you a lot more flexibility in your cash games to get the hitters you want, the other pitcher you want. He's a pretty strong -158 favorite. The big thing holding me back on him is that Kansas City doesn't strike out very much against righties. It's below 20%. So you're looking at probably 7-8 strikeouts in this game rather than trying to get 10-11 or something like that, like you can probably get from Kershaw tonight.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Obviously, Felix Hernandez is certainly in play, but you and I talk about it a lot. You don't like targeting guys against the Royals, but then again, you get a top 3 arm in the league. Of course, he's certainly in play there. And when there is a significant discount, like you said, on DraftKings, I think he makes for an even better play. And, maybe there will be a lot of people who see that and see the matchup against the Royals be scared off. Kind of like how people are going to be scared off Kershaw due to the high total and the wind and everything in Wrigley. But another guy I know you and I both like, Michael Pineda against the Phillies. Worst offense in the league against right-handed pitching. Pineda almost a 26% strikeout rate. Nice ground ball rate as well. Really the only thing that concerns you is the lefty bats. But are we really concerned about guys like Ryan Howard and Chase Utley in Yankee Stadium? Because I think ultimately, Pineda wins that battle more often than not.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's probably the safest out of every play today, as far as just picking up the win and having a strong game overall. You can see problems occurring with both Hernandez against Kansas City in some scenarios, and Kershaw in Wrigley with the wind blowing out. You can see some problems occurring there. I just really don't see anything you have to worry about with Pineda tonight. There's, of course, a short porch in right field at Yankee Stadium with both Utley and Howard hitting from the left side, but both of those guys haven't been great this year, and Pineda's looked really good lately.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen his upside, too. He had that 16 strikeout game against Baltimore. He's had a couple 9 strikeout games in his last 3. So, he's certainly a guy that I'm with you. I think he is the safest. He has the best matchup. Like we said, you don't love the ballpark, but it's also really not going to be something that's going to just scare you off, just the ballpark itself, because that lineup is just so terrible. Other options, a guy that I really like in GPPs here, Tommy Milone. He's $6,000 against the White Sox. We talked about in the pitcher nail down. We talk about every time a lefty faces the White Sox. They're not only the worst in the league, but they are the worst by far against lefties, striking out over 22% of the time. They have a team WRC plus a 45, team WOBA at 240. This is just a very, very bad team against lefties, and Malone has been pitching well, but even if he hadn't, I think he would still be in play against this terrible team right now.
Yeah, that's the way I feel about it. I think you just have to keep targeting people against the White Sox until they start hitting. It was a lot like what we were doing with both Philly and Milwaukee early in the season, just playing pitchers against them every day because every batter in their lineups were ice cold, and that's basically how the White Sox have been. Even if you have guys that don't strike out a ton of guys, the White Sox aren't a huge strikeout team, but they just don't put runs on the board. They don't get hits. There's just a lot to like there, especially on DraftKings where guys will give up 7-8 hits and it'll really hurt your total for the day. Against the White Sox, they've been averaging about 4.5 hits a game over the last, I think, 9 games. And not having that deducted from your score is huge on DraftKings.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's he's certainly in play. And then why don't you give me someone else that you're looking at? I know there's at least one guy here that's cheap that you're looking at as an option for GPPs tonight.
Yeah, at least on DraftKings. I think he's a fine play on FanDuel also in the mid-5s. But Kyle Ryan against a Cleveland team that just really struggles against lefties, I think is a fine play. Obviously, Ryan's not an elite pitcher or anything, but he's stuck around in the Tigers' rotation for the last 3-4 turns. He's been pitching pretty deep into games when he starts. I think he's made 3 starts this year, and he's gone at least 6 1/3 innings in all 3 of them. 7 and 6 1/3 in each of the last 2. Was fine against Cincinnati. Not great. Gave up 4 runs in 6 1/3 innings, but he's a guy that can eat up innings, which is always great on both DraftKings and FanDuel. We saw him have a nice game against the White Sox, who are a team that struggles with lefties also, not nearly as much as the Indians even do. He went 7 innings, gave up only 2 earned runs against them. So I think there's some nice upside here. He's a guy that's probably going to max out at more like 20, 22 DraftKings points at his absolute ceiling, but that's totally fine for a $4,500 price tag that you could pass with a lot less.
Yeah, I mean, like you were mentioning in an earlier podcast, there's a lot of hitters priced higher than $4,500 today. So certainly a lot more reward than risk in that play, I would say. And then I'm going to throw out one more interesting guy that we had talked about before. Drew Hutchison gets Tampa Bay, a really weak offense, not much power hardly at all throughout that lineup. $7,900. You mentioned him as a secondary cash option. I tend to agree with that. I think he's a fairly safe option tonight. And he's got a decent amount of upside. It's not a race team that strikes out a ton, but a little bit above league average. So if he gives you 6-7 strong innings, you don't mind that at all at just under 8K.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the way to go for sure.
All right, moving on to catcher. Guy that I absolutely love, and I love his price tag. He gets a lefty, kind of picking on your boy Kyle Ryan there. If there is anyone I'm going to be picking on with, it's Yan Gomes. Destroys left-handed pitching, $3,400. Great price for him. But if I'm not going with cheap with him, and I am paying up, I guess it's not much of paying up on a shorter slate, but it's going to be Brian McCann at $4,200 at home. Like you said, weak righty and Kevin Correa, short porch. I mean, we could go on and on about this one. Brian McCann's got to be your top option up top.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think he's a really strong play in basically all formats today. Anytime he's facing a weak righty at home, I feel pretty good about him. The power is still there. He's not a great average hitter anymore, especially when he's not facing a weak righty at home. But in that scenario, he's really, really strong play basically every time he takes the field at Yankee Stadium against a righty, and that's a lot of the times the only time he's in the lineup at this point. There's no one else I really love at catcher outside of him and Gomes. I think I'm probably staying away from most of these other guys. I don't mind if A.J. Ellis is in the lineup against Wada for the Dodgers. He's an okay cheap play at $2,700 on DraftKings. I think he's $2,200 on FanDuel. That's probably the other guy I would look at.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It's pretty slim pickings. It's go cheap with Gomes or pay up for McCann. First base, a lot of options. Gotta like Jose Abreu against the lefties. The one guy that you really like against Tony Malone. $5,100. A guy I'm a big fan of tonight, once again picking on Kevin Correa, Mark Teixeira, $4,700 at home. Got a ton of power. I mean, he's a guy who's been getting really unlucky with batting average and balls in play as well.
Yep.
And then if you're looking for a cheap guy, first baseman Evan Gattis gets a lefty. I know it's on the road. You wish it was a Minute Maid, but Hector Santiago, 52% fly ball rate. Gattis has a ton of power against lefties, too.
Yeah, definitely.
Other options at first base, Albert Pujols, of course, on fire right now. He's $4,500. If you want to go lefty-lefty with Adrian Gonzalez at $39, I don't blame you. But a guy I really love, this is probably going to be my cash game play, is Victor Martinez at $3,600 against Trevor Bauer.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong play there. I like that, too. I mean, I don't mind Carlos Santana as a GPP play. He's a guy I like playing from the right side because that's where a lot of his power comes from. Another guy facing Ryan, who we talked about at pitcher. If you're not playing him, I think you can do a mini Cleveland stack with Santana, Rayburn, and Gomes, and maybe mix in another guy there if they have another non-lefty in the lineup and do okay also. I don't mind Jose Abreu if you're not playing Malone. He's probably a GPP play, though. I don't really want to pay $5,100 for him in what's basically a dead lineup right now is the tough part. I mean, he comes across these matchups every once in a while with some lefties that I really want to play him against, and it's just hard to justify his price more because of the people around him than him. I don't really want to play Adrian Gonzalez against a lefty. I mean, he's fine against lefties, but it just doesn't feel like a great cash game play to me. I like Pujols quite a bit. He's probably my favorite first base play today against Oberholzer. He's just been too hot, too good against lefties. Wind's blowing out to left there. I think he's a really strong play in cash games, and he's just in general under-owned in GPPs too.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we move over here to second base, Brian Dozier, $5,000. He's expensive, but he crushes lefties. Gets a bad one in John Danks today, so I'm certainly going that route. Howie Kendrick against Yoshiwada at $4,000. A nice play there as well. And then his teammate, Justin Turner, beginning a nice lineup spot, $3,800. And this guy is destroying the ball right now. So
yeah.
Justin Turner, going to be a popular play tonight, rightfully so. And he's probably going to be my cash game option if I can't get Brian Dozier in there.
Yeah, that's a good call. I like him. I like Kendrick also. If Altuve's back in the lineup, I have a hard time not liking him as a GPP play against Santiago, lefty. It sounds like he's probably going to be out again, though, so I don't think we need to worry about that a ton. That's basically where I'm sticking. I don't mind if you want to punt on FanDuel with Steven Drew against Correa. He's always a fine punt play at home, in my opinion, against a weak righty like that, so he's interesting too.
Yeah, and I'll throw out one more guy here. He batted leadoff the other day. Johnny Giavotella, $2,900. If he gets a nice lineup spot, he hits lefties pretty well, and he's under $3K. So
yeah, that's not a bad one either.
All right, third base. You could always play Miguel Cabrera. I'm not going to be paying $5,100 for him tonight. I'm with you. I want to pay for pitching, get that stability there where I can. Kyle Seager against Joe Blanton, $4,400. Of course, you don't like the ballpark, but if you go back to last season when all these guys were crushing righties at home, that was the Kyle Seager that we used to know. Starting to show that a little bit more recently. And then, of course, Trevor Plouffe at home against the lefty and John Danks. Pairing him with Brian Dozier is always a great way to go and as a little mini stack.
Yeah, another guy that if he's in the lineup, I really like Alex Guerrero for the Dodgers. Always a strong play if he's in the lineup. He almost never is, though. But with that wind blowing out, facing a lefty, if he's in the lineup, I love him tonight. He's going to be in a ton of my lineups if he's in, especially on DraftKings where he's only $3,000. And has outfield eligibility, too. I mean, I just can't see not having him in my lineup if he's in the Dodgers lineup tonight. I like Seager. I don't mind him, like you said. I don't really want to pay up for Donaldson or Cabrera very much. I'll avoid A-Rod at a ridiculous $4,700 also. If I'm looking at the Yankees, when they're facing a righty like this, I prefer Chase Headley a little bit. He's sitting second in the order basically every day for them right now. He's $3,900. I think he's an all right play also.
Yeah, and I'll throw out David Freese. Should be batting cleanup against the lefty and Oberholzer as well. Shortstop, slim pickings as usual. Jose Reyes against Matt Andriese, a fine play if you're paying up, $4,400. Carlos Correa, once again, $3,900. He gets Hector Santiago. Outside of that, I'm probably going to be going cheap where I can, see who gets a good lineup spot, see who I can get in there. Kike Hernandez, if he's in the lineup, $2,400. Hopefully maybe he bats second if he's in the lineup tonight against Yoshiwada. He's going to be a lock for me in cash games. I'll probably play him quite a bit if he gets that lineup spot tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see the Dodgers lineup come out today because if they load that up with righties, there's a lot of value and a lot of power in that lineup. So,
bless you.
Sorry about that. Yeah, but that's going to be probably the lineup I'm waiting most for today before I start constructing lineups because there's just so much value in that lineup. You just mentioned Hernandez at shortstop. We talked about Guerrero at third base. We talked about A.J. Ellis at catcher. I mean, there's just a ton of value when they face a lefty, especially a lefty that can get hit like Wada.
Yeah, and there's a guy in the outfield we'll get to that's nice and cheap that we definitely want to play in some GPPs in that same lineup. So, going to be interesting to see what Don Mattingly does tonight. I'm with you there. Waiting with bated breath to see that lineup. Outfield options, of course, Mike Trout against the lefty. We don't need to tell you about that. Brett Gardner is an interesting swerve off him. I think he's a fine cash game option if you can fit him. Obviously gets a weak pitcher. I mean, this guy's been on fire recently. Did go over 3 last game, but before that, a triple and a double among 3 hits, a home run among 4 hits. Somehow hasn't stolen a base in any of those games. Actually, has only won in his last 10 games. But Brett Gardner really starting to come on. It's like that surge he had near the middle of last season where he was hitting home runs, hitting for power, stealing some bases. And he's one of those guys you're kind of hesitant to pay a top-notch price tag for. But, I mean, he's producing at a very high level right now. So I'm a big fan of his tonight, even at that price.
Yeah, me too.
Elsewhere, Nelson Cruz against Joe Blanton. Yes, it's a righty, but it's not a very good righty. He homered again yesterday. We were kind of waiting for him to get back into it. He struggled for a little bit after he came back from injury, but he's putting the ball in play. He's had at least 1 hit each of his last 4 games. So he's certainly a play at 4,900. 3 home runs last night. Mr. J.D. Martinez, $4,400, certainly in play against Trevor Bauer. I mean, that entire Detroit team is. You got to love Anthony Goes for cash games. Only 3,100 today. I think he's going to be a great play as well. And then you already kind of mentioned him, but Ryan Rayburn at $2,800 in a great spot as well.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a really heavily owned value play like he always is against lefties. At $2,800 on DraftKings, it's really hard not to play him.
Yep.
The other guy I like a little bit as a swerve GPP play there is Shane Robinson from Minnesota. Is a young righty that hits lefties pretty well. We know how bad Danks has been. He's only $2,300 on DraftKings, so I think he's a pretty nice value option. If you're looking to go 2 expensive pitchers on DraftKings today, I think going Rayburn and Robinson in the outfield can be a pretty strong way to go. Maybe even Anthony Goes, who you mentioned at $3,100. If you go with those 3 outfielders, you can load up the rest of your lineup pretty well with 2 good pitchers.
Yeah, that's a really good call there. I like that. And then another guy, Melky Cabrera, did have 5 hits in his last game. Not a guy that I wouldn't play him GPPs because he doesn't have the power upside, but I think he's an okay play. But $100 more than him is the guy I really, really like tonight. If you've been around for a couple of years, you know Scott Van Slyke has insane power against left-handed pitching. Yeah. Obviously, wind blowing out, Yoshi Wada is not very good. I can't fathom him not being in the lineup tonight. He better be. But at $3,600, he'll probably be my most highly owned hitter in GPPs tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that price is going to keep his ownership percentage down, I think, too, and the fact that he missed a lot of time with injury. It looks like he's played the last 4 games against lefties, so I think you're right. There's almost no way he's not in the lineup tonight. I agree with you. He's another great play. Fits right into the cheap outfield we were just talking about also at only $3,600 too, so I think he's a really strong one. Another guy I don't mind too much is Kevin Kiermaier against Hutchison tonight. He's $3,700 in that same price range. Hitting first in the order again. I mean, he's still really struggling with his batting average, but we know he's got some upside.
Yeah, absolutely. And his teammate, $100 more, Joey Butler, getting a nice lineup spot. And, I mean, the guy just continues to hit well, batting almost .330 on the season, showing some power. Gets Drew Hutchison, who I know we talked about him earlier as a starting pitching option, but Joey Butler is a great cash game play. Not a guy I play a lot in GPPs because he doesn't have a ton of upside, but he puts the ball in play a lot, so you got to like him in cash tonight.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, with that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.